I think I did that to a fault in some ways, right? Like I was like, I'm not gonna say anything negatively about that person on camera.
The moment when you most run the risk of saying something that you'll later regret is in the minutes or even days right after you've met someone for the first time, right?
Lesson 5,
Navigating the triangle.
As filming begins, you'll realize you're in a strange world where every move that you make is documented by cameras. This can be overwhelming at times, but you can protect yourself by maintaining an awareness of what's actually happening between you, your castmates, and the cameras. We refer to this as the triangle.
The dynamics of the triangle are often hard to detect. Remember that every interaction you have with other people on the show is in some way or another mediated by the production. Instead of trying to forget that the cameras are there and act natural, consider how the triangle is impacting your relationships with the people around you.
Remember the absence of confidentiality. Anything that happens in front of a camera now is liable to be shared with your castmates during the filming process. So Bennett, I think one of the things that I'm grateful for in this entire process, right, is our relationship. And that was something that was built organically through the show. And it was tricky navigating that entire process. Like, what was that process for you first? And then second, like, how did you prioritize what did you prioritize as like most important for you in this triangle experience?
For sure. So I was very lucky in that I had very recently kind of started therapy and had just kind of was extricating myself from an emotional triangle with two other people in this very complicated love situation. And so I was kind of hyper aware of the dynamics of the triangle and the reality that when you're in a triangle, as we are in always with the production, we're in many triangles at once, right? I and my partner and the show are in a triangle. You and I and the show are in a triangle. Me and any other cast member and the show are always in a triangle, right? And each of those triangles is going to have its own terms, right? And shape, right? And so I was very aware that if I choose Miles to say something about you to the producer, to the camera, I am bringing myself closer to the camera and to the production in that moment. And as I'm bringing myself closer to the production and the camera in that moment, I'm taking myself further away from you, right? And if I'm taking the time to talk to you and say like, yo, what's going on? Isn't this crazy what we're doing right here? Acknowledging that we're sharing this experience together and doing it preferably, under the gaze of the cameras is fine, but also outside of it is ideal, and saying like, what is this experience like for you? How are you approaching it? And how can the two of us best take care of each other? I'm not sure we ever had that kind of like really explicit conversation.
No, I don't think so.
But we definitely did talk about our experience as we were going through it, right? And sort of taking the time to have that conversation with, the person you're paired with, or just your castmates, right? The people who like are going to be sharing space with you so much of the time is going to ensure that you are closer with them than you are with the cameras. Now, I should add that like, if we're thinking back to our intentions that we established at the very beginning, you may be pursuing a career as like a kind of fiery influencer, right? In which case, now this is not the approach I would take. You might want to push away your castmates and say, some mean things about them, right? Again, I wouldn't personally endorse that. I don't think that's the healthy choice.
I think it's healthy or like the most like longevity if that's what your goal is.
For sure. Yeah. But like, if you're trying to just get a bunch of, there might be a world in which it might serve your intention to like be a gossip, right? And again, I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's respectful or kind to do that. But the key here above all else is knowing what you're after and making sure that your actions are serving your intentions. How about you, Miles? I'd love to hear about how you navigated the triangle. If there were any like particular experiences you had that you learned from as you were, both during and after the experience.
Yeah. I think I came into the experience particularly aware that I was doing this with one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter what, like I wasn't necessarily going into this experience to make friends with the castmates. I think that I was acknowledging going into it, me and my best friend are doing this experience together. This is an experience that no matter what, like I have his back always, and that he's gonna have my back always, and that this is a part of our story that we're never gonna forget.
Yeah.
And that's gonna bind us for like ever.
Yeah.
And because of that, I believe that was my approach to how I was gonna be with my partner and like treat them on camera and be respectful. But then also with my castmates, like I did not want to have any type of like fissure or tension between us because this is a unique experience that not a lot of people are going to ever experience in life. And there's no reason for us to have conflict, you know? And if we do have conflict, it's not going to be a public one. It's going to be something that we talk about offline.
Yeah.
I do think that I also wanted to be connected to the production team because they were an intimate part of this process with me and wanted to make sure that like I told you earlier, like I told you before, like the sound guy, like that relationship's important to me. Steve, man. TK, like different camera people, right? There's people who are time away from their families, spending a lot of time with us. Like we become a community for an extended period of time. And so how do we make sure that we're honoring and treating each other with respect? And I think that because if you lead that way, typically production will respect you in the same way. Not saying that's always the case, but that's how I felt. And so how do I think my allegiance first and foremost was me and my partner. I'm not going to ever disrespect that person. And I think I did that to a fault in some ways, right? Like I was like, I'm not going to say anything negatively about that person on camera. I think because of that, I was not as true with myself as I could have been in terms of, or in my communication with my partner, as I could have been about how I truly felt, which was neither here nor there, right?
Interesting.
My fault. Yeah.
No, I'd just love to ask you about that. So you're saying that because you made this pact with yourself that you would not speak ill about your partner on camera, that kind of like contaminated and crept into the dynamics of the actual relationship itself and made it so that you couldn't express those issues or problems even in the privacy of your relationship with them. Is that right?
I think I avoided it. You know, I feel I neglected to talk about the hard things until it became too much for me, right? Or I just think that things get blurry, right? It's
for real.
Like, what is you feeling this, like the triangle, right?
Yeah.
What is you feeling uncomfortable in front of a camera? Like, how does that playing into what our actual interaction is? Like, what is real, what's not?
Even in the privacy of your own home.
Even in the privacy, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, what am I getting the real you right now? Right. Conversely, right? Are you getting the real me right now? You know? And so that tension is really like strange. It is difficult navigating those relationships, but I don't think that I thought about it as if I am speaking about you to production, that it's pulling me further away from you.
If I'm saying to the cameras like, yeah, I love Miles. Miles is such a great person to hang out with. We have a great time together. I think he's so funny and nice. Like that, I'm not pulling away from you. I'm I'm saying nice things about you. It's really if I'm saying like, I don't know about Miles, like I'm not sure if I trust the guy, right? In that moment, I'm pushing you away, bringing myself closer to the camera, right? Privileging the production over you.
Makes sense.
I think that's a great point, though, about kind of there are two sets of rules that we need to establish with ourselves as we navigate the triangle. There are the rules for how we navigate the public triangle, right? What are we going to divulge to the cameras about our scene partners? And then there are the rules for the private triangle, right? So when you and your partner are in the comfort of your home, outside of the gaze of the cameras, right? How are you going to try to account for or acknowledge the ways in which the cameras, even though they're not there, are continuing to impact the dynamic between you, right? Because you might say like, oh, some relief, the cameras aren't here, like we can just act as ourselves. But the reality is, you're in this place, you're in this position with this person because...
Or people.
Because of the production. So it's important not to just act as if, okay, we can forget about it now. We can erase it now, right? Even when they're not there, it still is having an influence on your behavior, on your relationship. You might feel a sense of pressure. You don't need to necessarily like talk about it all the time. I'm not suggesting, because it's possible to overshare too and overtalk, but just to say like, hey, this is something that's impacting me and impacting us right now.
And I think about, there was a castmate that we had who I made initial first, well, the person did not give a initial positive first impression. And I didn't care about my relationship with that person, like long term, and may have said things about them that may have not been true or were not kind to the camera, right? And looking back, like regret those things because it was not necessary.
The moment when you most run the risk of saying something that you'll later regret is in the minutes or even days right after you've met someone for the first time, right? Because you might have like a first interaction. In our case, we had a bachelor party, right? Where we're expected to be rowdy and fun and have the, have hot takes and, say, have our final nights out as single men, right? For instance. And in those cases, they'll pull us aside for an OTF. They'll pull you aside for an OTF and they'll ask, what do you think of Bennett? He was like, what do you think? Wasn't it weird that he was dancing with a stripper the night before he's going to get married, right? And you're being set up to say something that is judgmental of that person. And you very well may have. We're human beings. Of course, we're always judging one another. As sad as it is, it's just something that's true. And you may have already made that judgment. You may think, yeah, I don't care what Bennett thinks about me when I say that, yeah, he's acting a fool right now, and this is totally uncool. He's going to get married tomorrow, right? You might end up regretting that because really, I'm a nice guy. It's just important, especially during those first few minutes, hours, days, to check yourself and remember like, oh, I might be coming to a premature judgment about this person.
I think a tough piece in that is, and I think about my example is, I developed relationships with the cast, right? And the person that I'm referring to is the person that I was like least proximal with. But I was also hearing things from production about how that person treated another person that I cared about on the cast, right? And so not because, you form alliances, right? But you also form relationships. And so it's like, hey, you're not treating this person who I just met, who I think fondly of, who I think fondly of. You're not treating them with respect. Like, I'm not going to respect you, And that's not necessarily the right thing to do, but like it's natural. And I think it's interesting that we are like, we are aware that like we're being pitted against each other and like falling for that trap doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. You might mess up and give a hot take that you feel either you shouldn't have said or like could be misconstrued in a certain way. I think you did a good job of this is, hey, early on camera, they asked me this thing and I said this. I don't want it to be misconstrued when it may be edited or when the show comes out that this is what I said about you. Yeah. And like, let's talk about this right now so that like, it doesn't further like along the line be a thing that we're struggling with. Yeah. I think that's the most like safe way that you can, and kind way that you can handle something, because you're going to say things that like in the heat of the moment, you're tired, you're hot, you're nervous, you're feeling all these different things. And like, I remember we were in Mexico and they wouldn't feed us They would not feed us, dude. I was so hungry, and they were like, "No, you can't eat. You got to wait till what's it called?" And I'm like, "Bro, I don't give a damn about none of this shit. I just want to get this over with so I can eat." And I just said whatever. I don't think I said anything mean, but like I was like just talking, you know, like I just want to get this over with. And so there's so much that can like lead up to what you're saying, but as long as you are trying to repair or like be very communicative with the people around you, like people understand if you make mistakes.
Yeah. I love that. That's a great point. Like, prepare yourself to make those mistakes. And when you do make those mistakes, before they come out, just communicate with the person. Apologize ahead of time so that that person is prepared to hear it. Yeah, that's an amazing point. Also, just a little mental trick that might be a great thing to have in your back pocket. If the production is asking me to say something about Miles, rather than, you know, while I'm looking at the producer, I might just replace my image of the producer with Miles. So again, if I'm saying anything behind Miles's back, I have to always remember that actually I'm saying it to his face, right? So try to, if you can, visualize that person in front of you, right? Because it might feel in the moment like you're saying it behind their back, but actually you're saying it directly to them.
For the past activities, it's been pretty clear on like what your deliverable is. For this one, we want you to be able to reflect a little bit. So when you're thinking about your triangle, how do you want to prioritize your castmates? How do you want to prioritize production? What do you want your relationship with them to be like? If you share a hot take, how are you going to repair that with the people that you're working with? How much of your intention do you want to communicate with your scene partners? It feels like the clearer the better. However, navigate it the best way for you and for the people around you.
Now that we've established how we want to navigate the triangle, we'll dive a little bit deeper. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the relationship between personal safety and entertainment.